Hello and welcome back to Time to Change. Today I have in the house Kris Holmes. Kris is a minister, a fractional leader, and a friend to HR-4U and a friend to me. Kris has been someone that I can speak with honestly, that we can talk about our faith, that we can talk about our journey, that we can talk about life and kids and all of the above. And today we're going to talk about inclusion begins with Kris.
Yeah. That's a great question, Jason, and thanks for the introduction. Happy to be on the Time for a Change podcast with you. Inclusion starts with asking the right questions.
Ooh, absolutely.
I think of yourself first and then outward into the situations, the spaces, the work, places, whatever those spaces are for you that you occupy. It starts with asking the right questions. What am I assuming? What do I not know? I think that's where it starts for me.
So let's you started with a couple of different questions, but let's talk about those questions, because a lot of times leaders say, well, I ask questions. Okay, well, asking someone if they're okay isn't necessarily the same as how do we start and engage in conversation. So what's a good way to help with building trust and building safe spaces and building the ability to have that inclusion be part of our culture? What are good questions to start asking?
Yeah, just right there with the question of, are you okay? I would ask myself first, what will I do? What's my response if they're not okay?
Good.
Right.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
what types of support do we have set up? What types of types of conversations do we feel comfortable or equipped to handle? Because then you're going to also need a layer of support, or your community of care, or whatever people call it, that circle, where you have those places set up. So that would just be one of the things I would ask myself as a leader in spaces that I occupy. In youth ministry, right? I have to know what that boundary line is of what I can handle, what types of conversations that I'm equipped and able to handle, what types of situations need to go to parents, what types of situations need to go to, external resources, therapists, community leaders, those types of things. So, and in the workplace, we can think about that, in different ways too. So is this person overworked? Do they feel like the people or the structure of their team isn't, supporting the goals of their job? What types of not okay, are we equipped to handle? So
I love that you frame that with saying that you have to understand yourself and you have to understand what within the boundaries of talking about workspace, you have to know how you can help and what those boundaries are. Because if you go in blindly and you're bringing in information and allowing the conversation to go to places where you are not either mentally or physically capable of handling, then you're going to do more damage than you are good. So I love that you're framing it that way. How do we take a leader is, we talk about leadership all the time, and we talk about all of these things that happen to create leadership. But this conversation is about creating, what inclusion means. So from a leadership role, I'm in a leadership role and I want to create more inclusive environments. I understand that I need to ask the right questions and I've got to set the boundaries. What do I do externally or internally to create programs and procedures and policies and put them in place so that I can help as many people as possible, but it still have those boundaries to protect ourselves and the company.
Yeah, no, great question. Again, for me, my experience has been in what environments have I felt most comfortable or included, and start writing down what those environments felt like, what those workplace cultures felt like. Did they have opportunity for growth? If they did have opportunity for growth, then how did they cultivate that? How did they make sure that I knew that that the opportunities for growth were obtainable for me?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Right.
No, yeah, it makes total sense. You're going to start out by, okay, here's what I've learned and how I felt. So what do you do when people don't want to respond, that they're nervous because they feel like, I've been down this path before and people have used this information not to create more inclusive spaces, but to use it against me?
Yeah, now we're talking about specifically from a workplace environment. I can speak to, to my experiences and some things that I was able to build at companies I was a part of. One of the things was having kind of an office hours calendar. So there's parameters on it. You can only sign up for, one time per month, and it was 15 minutes, and they have to, kind of stick to that time frame or parameter. But in that conversation, what I wanted to know from them was, what isn't working for you now in your lack of feeling like you belong, or you're connected to your team, or your work has purpose? Can you just walk me through that? And it was not, if the person that I was speaking to or connecting with kind of got on well, Jason's been doing this and bothering me. It's like, okay, let's keep it in our sphere of control, like things that we can do, things that we know about ourselves. So some of the things that you can do are like personality assessments, career growth and trajectory conversations. What has it looked like in the past for you where you felt like, things were progressing for you, or you had inclusive environments? Can you explain that to me? Because then the more we know about the person, the types of environments where they feel like they thrive in, we can offer support, help, training to their teammates, to their managers. We can, offer more inclusive structures overall for the organization. So we kind of had these listening sessions, if you will, right? Listening to employees that, might be on the verge of leaving the organization. We want to prevent regrettable termination. How do we do that? Well, first we have to understand, why are people leaving? And so just creating and fostering those environments of trust. And like you said, where this call is not being recorded, these types of learnings are not to get you in trouble or anything. And it's really to build these programs. And so building that trust first can take some time, and it depends on what that person's prior experience has been. We have to know that. And oftentimes healing can't happen. Even workplace mistrust can't happen outside of the container that it was wounded in. And so what I mean by that is, if I had mistrust with a previous manager, typically that's going to be healed for me with a manager that I don't have mistrust with,
right?
With a manager that I've built a relationship with. Then over time, I can start to say, okay, well, not every situation, not all managers, not all teams, not all companies, right, have been this way. So how can I take these learnings and findings and build what you're saying, build them into inclusive practices? And that can look different for every company and every team. But often it just
and for
starts
every
with
person too.
listening, questions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think it even tweaks down to being different for each person, because each person has a different journey, has a different set of circumstances, comes from a different background, and listening to those unique journeys and creating the psychologically safe spaces to where they feel comfortable being outward and communicating their needs, because there has to be a level of trust in order for someone to communicate their needs. I love two things you said. One of the things I've heard this, the conversations that you were talking about, I've heard that referred to by some HR people as stay interviews,
Mm-hmm.
exit interviews, stay interviews.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that in some ways, but more I like the idea that you're having one-on-ones and you're touching base with your people on a consistent level. I think that's so important, because as their life changes and their circumstances changes, and maybe even their purpose changes,
Yep.
that you are there having a front seat and can help with directing the conversation to where people feel like, okay, I've now shared with you, you see kind of where I'm at, and we
Mm-hmm.
can look at upskilling, reskilling, devising different programs, helping me along my journey, which in turn will help the company. And I
Yep.
think that that's just very intuitive as a leader. So that's bravo for that. I love that. Whatever you call it, one-on-one, stay interviews, whatever the terminology is, the fact that you're doing it and that you make it happen, that you're intentional about it. You put down your phone, you shut it off, you're not taking emails. No one's going to call you and interrupt you as a leader, that you're going to be
Yeah.
present for that time period. I think that's huge.
Yep. And having conversations too with people who are outside of your immediate, because you should typically in an organization have a standard practice where you're having a one-on-one with your manager. But this would be like a one-on-one with, your HR leader or somebody within the HR realm that is kind of your advocate in the organization. It's a little bit different than your manager, who I would see that as more of a sponsorship type of relationship. They're sponsoring you in the organization because they know your work ethic. They see you from a different angle, right? When the HR person might only see you from time to time. If you think of like a school setting for kids, you have your dean of students and your principal, right? But then your teacher that sees them every day has a different perspective of that student.
Sure.
So it's one of those things where setting up the expectation from the beginning or the beginning of a new process and saying, hey, we would like to implement this. We think it's going to bring these types of changes to our organization, your team, and ultimately your experience here at the company. Get their feedback and build from that point forward. But those are some of my experiences.
That's great. We're almost out of time. These are 15-minute deep dives into a subject, but you have done a great job of nailing some solid points that people can go back to. Any final thoughts on starting an inclusive environment within the culture of a business for a leader?
Yep. Don't forget to ask yourself the questions. What would I do if this is the result, outcome, experience of the people that I'm serving? Because sometimes we lean into solutions first without the examination of ourselves. So that's my main takeaway for today.